My husband's family banned me from Thanksgiving dinner because I embarrassed his sister. His mistress sat in my chair laughing at my pain. But when she accidentally sent me a voice message meant for him, everything they built on lies came crashing down. This is how I took back my power. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell because you're not going to believe how this unfolds. Drop a comment telling me what you would have done in my shoes. Now let me tell you how a billionaire and his mistress underestimated the wrong black woman. You ever look back on your life and see all the red flags you ignored? Yeah, me too. My name is Brianna, and 7 years ago, I married a man I thought was my forever. Christopher Wellington. That name probably sounds familiar if you follow business news. Billionaire, pharmaceutical mogul, old money family, the whole package. We met at a real estate conference where I was speaking about urban development projects. I had built my own commercial real estate firm from the ground up, and I was proud of what I'd accomplished. He approached me after my panel, all charm and confidence, and I'll be honest, I was flattered. A man like that, interested in a woman like me? It felt like a fairy tale. We got married after a year of dating, and that's when I should have seen it. His family was cold from the very beginning, not hostile, just cold. Like I was a guest who'd overstayed their welcome before I even unpacked my bags. His mother would smile, but it never reached her eyes. His father barely acknowledged me unless other people were around. And then there was Vanessa, his younger sister. She made it clear from day one that I wasn't good enough for her brother. Every family dinner, every holiday, every gathering, she'd find little ways to remind me I didn't belong. Comments about my hair, my clothes, where I grew up, how I pronounced certain words. Christopher would just laugh it off, tell me I was being too sensitive, that Vanessa was just protective of him. I tried, y'all. I really tried. I showed up with gifts, I complimented her, I asked about her life, her interests. Nothing worked. She looked at me like I was dirt on her expensive shoes. But I loved Christopher, and I thought if I just kept being myself, kept being kind, eventually they'd see me for who I really was. 7 years. 7 years of biting my tongue, of making myself smaller, of pretending their little digs didn't cut deep. 7 years of being the only black woman in rooms full of people who made sure I never forgot it. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, everything came to a head. Christopher's family was hosting their annual charity gala, one of those black tie events where rich people write checks to feel good about themselves. I'd helped plan it, actually donated a significant amount from my own company. The seating chart had me at the main family table, next to Christopher. I thought nothing of it. But when we arrived, Vanessa had a full meltdown in front of everyone. She claimed I'd stolen her seat, that I'd deliberately tried to embarrass her by sitting in her spot. None of that was true. The place cards were exactly where the planner had put them, but Vanessa turned on the tears, played the victim, and suddenly I was the villain. I stayed calm. I didn't yell, didn't cause a scene. I simply said, "Vanessa, the seats are assigned. If there's an issue, we can ask the coordinator." That's it. That's all I said. But apparently that was too much. She ran off crying, and Christopher's entire family looked at me like I'd slapped her. Christopher pulled me aside and asked me to apologize. I refused. I hadn't done anything wrong, and I was tired of apologizing for existing. We barely spoke the rest of the night. The drive home was silent, and that silence stretched into days, then weeks. 2 days before Thanksgiving, Christopher came home from work with that look on his face, the one that meant he was about to say something I wouldn't like. We were in the kitchen, and he couldn't even look me in the eye when he said it. "Brianna, I think it's best if you sit this Thanksgiving out. Vanessa's still upset about the gala, and Mom thinks we should give her space." I just stared at him. My own husband was uninviting me from a family holiday, not asking me, telling me. I asked him if he was serious, and he said it was just this once, just to keep the peace. He promised we'd spend Christmas together, that this would blow over. Like I was the problem that needed to blow over. I didn't fight him. I was too hurt, too tired. I just nodded and said fine. He left that Thursday morning, kissed me on the forehead like nothing was wrong, and drove 3 hours upstate to his parents' estate. I spent the morning crying in our bedroom, then pulled myself together and drove to my mother's house in Newark. She took one look at my face and knew. She didn't say I told you so, even though she'd warned me about Christopher's family from the beginning. She just held me and fed me and let me pretend everything was okay. But around 4 in the afternoon, my phone started buzzing. Instagram notifications, messages from friends, questions I didn't understand. I opened social media, and my heart just stopped. There were photos, multiple photos from the Wellington family Thanksgiving. The table was beautiful, everyone dressed up and smiling. And there, in my seat, right next to Christopher, was a blonde woman I'd never met. She was laughing, touching his arm, completely comfortable, like she belonged there, like that was her place. I zoomed in on the tags. Lauren Mitchell. I clicked her profile. Public account, thankfully. I started scrolling, and my hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped my phone. This woman had been in my husband's life for months. There were pictures of them at restaurants I recognized, events I thought he'd gone to alone, weekend trips he'd claimed were business conferences. She was wearing jewelry I'd seen in our house. In one photo from 2 months ago, she had on a diamond bracelet Christopher told me he'd bought for himself as an investment piece. I went back further. 18 months. This affair had been going on for 18 months, and I'd had no idea. I felt like the biggest fool in the world. But what really destroyed me was seeing Vanessa in those photos, her arm around Lauren, both of them smiling like best friends. Because that's what they were, college roommates, I learned from the tagged photos. Vanessa had introduced them. Vanessa had known the entire time and had helped hide it. Every cold comment, every bit of disrespect, every time she'd made me feel small, it was all part of pushing me out so her friend could take my place. And the gala incident? That wasn't about a seat. That was about creating a reason to exclude me, to make me the bad guy so nobody would question why I wasn't at Thanksgiving. They'd played me perfectly. I couldn't eat. I couldn't think. My mother was furious, ready to drive up there herself, but I stopped her. I needed to be smart about this. I spent Thanksgiving evening screenshotting everything, every photo, every comment, every tag. I went through Christopher's credit card statements that I had access to. Charges at hotels, expensive dinners, gifts I'd never received. It was all there, and I'd been too trusting to look. I documented everything, organized it all into folders. My mind was racing, but I forced myself to stay calm. Anger wouldn't help me. Evidence would. At 11 that night, my phone buzzed with a new notification. A voice message on Instagram from Lauren Mitchell. My finger hovered over it for a second before I pressed play. What I heard made my blood run cold, and then hot, and then cold again. She was drunk, very drunk. And she thought she was sending this to Christopher, but somehow she'd clicked my profile instead. For 3 minutes and 22 seconds, I listened to her on speakerphone with Vanessa, and they said everything. They talked about me like I was nothing, made fun of my natural hair, called my business cute, mocked the way I'd tried to fit in with the family. Lauren laughed about how Christopher was finally ready to divorce me, how his lawyers were already drawing up papers to get around our prenup. She bragged about moving into our house before Christmas, redecorating my bedroom, getting rid of my things. Vanessa chimed in, so proud of herself, saying the gala tantrum was perfect timing to create distance. She said, and I quote, "We finally got rid of her, just needed an excuse." They talked about me like I was trash they'd successfully thrown out. But here's the thing they didn't know. That prenup they were so confident about? It had mistakes, big ones. Christopher's lawyers had gotten sloppy, and I had my own attorney, my best friend from college, who'd reviewed everything when we got married. She'd pointed out clauses that wouldn't hold up, provisions that actually favored me if certain conditions were met. Infidelity was one of those conditions. Hidden assets were another, and Christopher had plenty of both. I saved that voice message to 3 different places, sent it to my lawyer immediately, even though it was late on Thanksgiving night. She called me back within 20 minutes, wide awake and furious on my behalf. We talked for 2 hours, building a strategy. By the time I hung up, I wasn't crying anymore. I was ready. Christopher came home Sunday evening like nothing had happened, asked me how my Thanksgiving was, said he'd missed me, even brought me leftovers his mother had packed. I wanted to throw them in his face, Instead, I smiled and thanked him. I asked about his family, listened to him lie about how it was just a quiet dinner, nothing special. He was so comfortable in his deception, so confident I'd never find out. I went to bed that night next to a stranger, and I didn't sleep at all. Monday morning, I made breakfast, eggs, toast, coffee, his usual. We sat at the kitchen table and I waited until he was relaxed, scrolling through his phone. Then I pulled out my phone, connected it to our Bluetooth speaker and pressed play. Lauren's voice filled our kitchen. Every mocking word, every cruel laugh, every detail of their plan. Christopher's face went from confused to pale to panicked in about 10 seconds. He tried to grab my phone, but I pulled it back. He started talking fast, making excuses, saying it wasn't what it sounded like, that Lauren was lying, that he could explain everything. I let him finish. Then I said, "Your lawyer's explanation can come through mine." Right on cue, because I'd planned this perfectly, our doorbell rang. My attorney, with divorce papers and a lawsuit for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. See, what Christopher didn't know was that when I'd invested money from my business into his company 5 years ago, the way he'd structured that deal gave me certain rights. Rights his lawyers had overlooked. And the merger he had planned with a major European pharmaceutical company, the one worth $200 million, that needed my signature as a shareholder, a signature I was absolutely not giving him. I filed for divorce that morning. Full disclosure of assets, including the offshore accounts I'd discovered through my own investigation. I demanded my share of everything we'd built, together and separately, because the prenup's infidelity clause invalidated most of his protections. His face when he realized what he'd lost was almost worth the pain he'd caused. Almost. But I wasn't done. I posted everything on social media, the voice message, the photos, the receipts, all of it. I tagged everyone who needed to see it. His family, his business partners, our mutual friends. I wrote one caption: "When they try to erase you from the table, make sure the whole world sees why." It went viral within hours. Thousands of messages of support, news outlets picking it up, think pieces about infidelity and family betrayal. Christopher's reputation took a hit he'll never fully recover from. And Lauren? Turns out she had a fiancé, a wealthy investment banker who had no idea she was sleeping with a married billionaire. He saw my posts, called off their engagement, and from what I heard, demanded back the ring and the down payment on the condo he'd bought for them. Her perfect little future evaporated overnight. Vanessa's husband reached out to me personally, apologizing for his wife's behavior. He'd never known about any of it, and he was disgusted. Last I heard, they're separated, and he's filing for divorce too. Guess loyalty runs in that family. Straight down the drain. Christopher's parents tried to do damage control, released some statement about privacy and family matters. But the business community doesn't forget. Partners started distancing themselves. The merger fell through completely, costing his company hundreds of millions. Board members called for his resignation. His empire didn't crumble overnight, but the cracks are showing and they're getting wider. My divorce settlement was finalized 6 months later. I got half of everything, plus damages. Opened a second office for my real estate firm in Atlanta, expanded into 3 new markets. My business is thriving because I built it on my own merit, not lies and family money. I'm finally free to be myself, to take up space, to speak without worrying about who I'm offending. And yeah, I've started seeing someone new. Someone who introduces me to his family proudly, who doesn't ask me to shrink, who sees my value without me having to prove it. Christopher tried to reach out a few months ago, some long email about regret and mistakes and hoping we could talk. I deleted it without reading past the first line. He had his chance. He had 7 years of chances, and he chose Vanessa's approval and Lauren's lies over our marriage. That's on him, not me. Listen, I didn't just get even, I got free. If this story fired you up, smash that like button. Subscribe because I've got more stories about taking back your power. Comment below, I see you, sis. If you understand why silence isn't always weakness, sometimes it's strategy. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, they can try to erase you from the table, but they can't erase what you built. I'm out.